Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Megan Stroup. Looking forward to our conversation today. Megan, really had a great chat a couple of months ago. I'm sure this one's going to be good too. Yeah. So Megan is an adoptee, and she's also a therapist. And I don't know if you've noticed, listeners, but we've started focusing in on healing. And that's because when I set up the podcast, I was talking about inspiring, empowering, and helping adoptees heal through the insights of the guests, right? And I think the healing bit is the biggest bit that's needed. What do you reckon to that, Megan?
Yes, I agree. I think that people, when they come to look for a podcast or they look for help, that's ultimately the goal, is to find other people who are dealing with the same things that they're dealing with, and then ultimately to know, A, that they're not alone, and then B, that they can feel better or that they can heal from whatever they're experiencing.
Yeah,
But thank you. Thank you so much for having me with you today. I too enjoyed our conversation a couple months ago.
cool. So you use the word feel better, and that's kind of one definition, I guess, of feeling of healing. But how do you see how do you see healing? Because it's one of those words that's talked about a lot, but we've all got different definitions of it. So how do you see it yourself, Megan? How do you see it?
As a therapist, how I would quantify healing, it would be reduction of symptoms that are causing trouble for the person. It would be improvement of just abilities in life to be thriving. So we would see those two things happening: reduction of negative symptoms and improvement of overall quality of life. And then to feel better, I think is a the person knows if they're feeling better or not. Typically we can see it when we see someone. There's more light in their eyes. You can see it in their spirit when it's coming forward, shining through them or not. You might meet somebody for the first time when they enter the therapy room, and they're kind of down and maybe ashamed or feeling sad, and they're just overridden with emotion. But they're able to come in after some time, and we have that, feeling better place, and they are their head is up, and they're able to have some distance between, back when we met, I remember feeling this way, but now I can definitely see improvements in these areas of my life, and they can talk about the distance.
Yeah. Have you heard about I don't know, it was a coach or a therapist that got that got the client to count how many chimney stacks there were between walking from their house to the therapist? Have you heard that one?
No.
So this guy walked. From, it was walking distance from his home to the therapist, and the therapist got them to count the number of chimney stacks, and that was to get their head up.
That makes sense.
To get their head up, and we think of the image that's coming to me, apart from the cat that's behind you.
I know, she just hopped up here to say hello.
Hi, we've been spoon bombed by a cat. It is kind of like military, like soldiers are taught to kind of like, push their chest out and lift their heads up. and
Mhm.
and sing, and it's about union and communion, whatever, being that together, that force together. But it's also about being in a better space, when we get our head up. So what one did a podcast last week, and I was talking. We were talking about spirituality, and how sometimes this is left out, right? And the guest said, well, yeah, but it's got to be holistic, right? It's got to be mind, spirit, and body, that holistic kind of thing. And you're saying that you can see it, you can see it in their faces.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what have been and also you said quantify the number of negative symptoms down. So we've got a quantify, and we've got a quality issue, like the
Right.
quality of how we're feeling. What have been the key moments on your personal kind of healing journey, Megan?
I think there have been a couple of key moments for me. There were some big kind of light bulb moments that I think, looking back now, they were really big doorways to healing, and mindset shifts that allowed me to um, remove some anger and bitterness, which was really helpful. Um, this is one of the things that, and they weren't always through therapists. I actually didn't find a therapist that I felt like I was really in tune with until my mid 30s. And, so that was honestly fairly recently. But um, so I went through much of this journey of healing without the assistance of a therapist. But one of the things that was said to me early on, so my story kind of, I'll briefly tell that quickly here. My mother got pregnant with me as a teenager, and my biological father opted not to be involved at that time. Um, I've heard a couple of different accounts about why that was, but basically, he was not involved. And my mom considered doing an actual adoption placement, but it was decided that I would be kept within the family. And so that is what happened. My mom would visit me, and I still called her mom, but my caregiver, that was like my 24/7 parent figure caregiver, was someone that I called my nanny. And I went, I lived with my nanny until I was about, um, I guess 5 or so, when I went to school. Um, and then even up until then, like, well, sorry, it's there's a lot of moving
Yeah,
parts with
yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah. Take your time.
because every person who comes into my office and is telling me an adoption story, they always say at one point, it's really complicated. And I say, oh, they all are. Because they all are. Um, there's no linear adoption story that I have found yet. So I did not know that I knew that I had lived with my nanny for the first early years of my life, and that my mom was young when she had me. Um, what I didn't know is that my biological father wasn't my dad who was raising me now. And so I accidentally found that out. A friend my mom's friend actually shared that information with me when I was 15 years old. And it was really shocking to hear that information. That did not go well. And that coupled with some other things, I moved out of my parents' house about 6 to 7 months later. It was really startling, but I will say initially my reaction was like, what kind of guy doesn't choose to raise his child? It was initially framed, I think, that he had not wanted to be involved. And I think that there's truth to that. I think that, he was young and that he had not wanted to be involved. And so he wasn't. Well, then when I was just so mad, like, what kind of man chooses not to be in a relationship with his child? And, I said something, I have an aunt who was being a substitute teacher at my school one day. And this isn't an aunt that I'm particularly close to, but I really like her, and she's very sweet and very kind. And I told her, I said, well, I've recently found out that, I'm adopted and that Chris isn't my dad. And she goes, oh yeah, honey. I mean, we all know, everybody in the family knew except me, because I was like, a little kid when I showed up, and they knew that, that Chris wasn't my dad. And so, but I didn't know that. And she said, well, yeah, we all knew that. And I said, I just can't imagine what kind of man. And she said, well, honey, look at yourself. I mean, I was a junior in high school, and she said this, and she said, this was, imagine the boys in your class last year being a dad. This isn't, that's who would have been. And I was like, oh my goodness, you're right. This wasn't a man. I'm looking at like 30 something year olds and going, what kind of man leaves their child, when I really should have been looking at 15-year-olds, because that's who was making that decision. And I looked there and I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, I love my friends, but they're all idiots, and no way would I allow any of them to be a dad at that time. So that really helped. There were some really big attitude shifts at that time, and it helped me realize this wasn't a man making that decision. This was a child, and really took a lot of that frustration and anger away towards him. And I decided shortly after that I wanted to meet then my biological father. So I've done that now, and we've been in relationship since then. Well, since a month before I turned 18.
Yeah. Wow. So you talk about big light bulb moments and mindset shifts. We don't hear the word mindset a lot in adoptee land, do we? It's not a word that's kind of used a lot.
No, really, it's not. Now that you say that, it's not one that I see.
Yeah. Why? I mean, why do you think that is?
Adoption feels really polarizing. Um, I feel like as a therapist who is an adoptee, I have to really be careful with the marketing that I put out to not polarize people. I do, for instance, I do an adoptive mom retreat. I don't do adoptee retreats because there is a phenomenal group here in the States that does that. And I support them, and all of the people who need that, I'm like, go to them. And birth mom retreats, there's a phenomenal group right by me in Illinois that they do those. And so they've cornered the market. They're doing phenomenal jobs. And so I don't need to reinvent the wheel there. but I did see a need for adoptive moms to get support and have these retreats. And so I started doing those, and I really did wonder, what would people think? Would they assume that I wasn't for adoptees? Because there are adoptees who hate adoption. Um, and I'm not speaking negatively about that. I just know that there is a very negative connotation among our community. Um, I wish that my story was different. I wish that I had grown up knowing my biological father. I wish that I had grown up knowing all of my brothers. Still to this day, I will be 41 years old tomorrow. I have never been in the same room with all of my brothers, and I can't imagine a time in my life where I would be. That is a difficult pill to swallow. Um, it's truly heartbreaking to me. Um, but I think there are um, there are losses in every family, and I think for the most part, adoptive parents go into it certainly uneducated, but trying to do the best that they can. And I think that they get a really bad rep. Um, so I don't know. That's a tough one, but mindset shifts. So um, I think I think there we talked about this in our last conversation, that um, sometimes I see people who kind of go, well, adoption is the root of all things that are bad. Um, and other times people say, well, adoption is okay, and I made it out and I'm okay because of it. Or, there's a lot of I don't want to say blame casting, but like choosing to say that we are one way or another because we were adopted. Um, and I think that that's difficult. But I mean, I see people adopted or not, um, and they have many of the same challenges in life. Um, and that adoption is often part of the story, but certainly not the whole story.
Also, so a couple of things. First off, have a great birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
Secondly, what's the retreat group that you're referring to?
Yeah, so it's just something that I do out of my private practice. It's just a really small, it's been super small from what I've seen so far. And I book like an Airbnb and take several women, and we go and have a weekend away, and I plan some kind of self-care events and host that once a year.
Cool. And the adoptee one, is that Hiraeth?
Hiraeth, yes. Yeah, adoptee is Hiraeth, and then birth mother is oh gosh, let me think of this. It's out of Illinois. Give me one moment.
Yeah.
I'll think of it.
It's Cindy that does the Hiraeth retreats, isn't it? If I remember rightly, she's been on the show, so I'll put a link in the show notes in case anybody wants to check out those retreats. Yeah. And third thing is, I think maybe we don't hear the word mindset because we think it's all about our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Mindset feels like thoughts. It feels like a brain activity, not a heart activity. And
See that?
maybe that's why I didn't know. I didn't have an answer when I asked you the question, and But I think it's those, I think it is those shifts in what's going on in our brain that change it. It's when we're in a space, we're in a relaxed space. So we're in a relaxed space with our therapist, we're in a relaxed space listening to a podcast, we're in a relaxed space reading a book about adoption or something, and somehow something clicks for us, and that switches the light bulb on. And as I say this, I'm thinking moments in my life, and I think some of them have been in their relaxed space and some of them haven't. But there is a change. It involves a change of something. It's a change in the way that we see stuff. So maybe it's a change in our kind of attribution. I think that's kind of, I think that's the posh word for saying, you know, what we put something down to, what we attribute an issue down to. So seeing a therapist last week, right? I'm aware of over attribution. Like I'm aware of blaming too much on adoption, and yet I still do it. You know, I was talking to the therapist, and I was talking about a business thing, right? And she said, "Well, I think everybody would do that, Simon. I think everybody would be, you know, thinking about that, you know, considering their income going forward and looking at their. So this is to do with some properties that we've got, right? A couple of little cottages that we rent out. I think everybody would be concerned on that. What I'm interested in addressing with you, Simon, is the deeper stuff. It's the deeper stuff. And she also mentioned that she'd seen a difference in the way I was looking. Right. So that was interesting when you talked about you seeing that difference in your clients, because we're with ourselves 24/7, or if we're sleeping 8 hours, you know, we're aware of ourselves 16, you know, 16/7, and it's hard to see. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this recently, but I used to talk about it a lot on the podcast. A coach I knew used to say it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. Hard to see the picture. We've got so much going on. We don't have any distance from our experience. We're all tied up in that, right? So it is, and that's one of the reasons that talking to somebody else, whether it's your therapist or whether it's your aunt who is a substitute teacher, they can see stuff and they offer an opinion, and you see the truth in that, right? You saw the truth. You saw the truth. You saw the common sense, almost the common sense in that, and that changed. I think the word you used was bitterness, and was it bitterness and anger? That changed the bitterness and anger that had been fermenting for what, maybe 10 years, 15 years, I don't know, not 50, couldn't be 15 years, could it? Maybe 8 years. I don't know. How long had that, how long had you, do you remember being aware of that? Kind
of? Well, from 15, so that was probably like two years at that point.
2 years of bitterness. Yeah. And it went with one, or it didn't go completely, but it
I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh, of course, that makes sense. I was not thinking about this person being a 15-year-old. I was thinking of him as a man.
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges is this this validation piece, right? So your aunt did not validate you in that moment, and
No.
you know, my life changing moments have been when I have been invalidated almost.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we're going we're going through this life seeking validation, and yet it's the invalidation that sometimes changes our world. I mean, that's a bit nuts, really, isn't it? I don't know. I hadn't seen it quite as simply as that. I don't know
What is
what you make of
interesting,
it.
so many people come to therapy wanting that. They want a therapist who um, doesn't nod and smile and agree with them. They want someone, it's often written in our group looking for therapy, they want somebody who's going to call them on their BS. That's what it
Right?
said. Yeah. So
Yeah.
people want that.
And yet in the adoptee community, there's so much of the validation seeking, isn't there? And I'm
Yeah.
talking about the Facebook world. I'm talking well, the social media world. It's
Yeah.
not just Facebook, but Instagram, whatever, Twitter as well.
Well, and I mean, let's just talk about from an emotional point of view. I mean, my goodness, I don't know. It's difficult to imagine what other people feel in their own lives, right? But I know for me, validation seeking has been a huge part of my life. Being a nice girl, that was very important to me. Several years ago, I hosted every fall I would do like a makeup party or a candle party or something like that at my house. And several years ago, everyone at the party was asked to send a word to describe me, and they were all sweet or caring. And I don't know, a year or two ago, I hosted one, and the words were like uh, confident, um, knows what she wants, like those kind of things. And I remember being like, man, I'm not as sweet as I used to be, but I know who I am now. And I think getting older has really helped with that. Um, Not feeling like I still feel like I'm a very good person and really want to be kind to people and that kind of thing. But um I'm not sweet to my own expense anymore. I'm better at setting boundaries. And that's hard. That is hard to do, but I was always so afraid of what would someone think if I said this out loud? What would someone think? And um yeah, it feels better to not be in that position anymore.
Yeah. So, what are the things that have led to that change over time?
Um, I think age has something to do with it. So for anyone who's worried about the next birthday or the next candle going on the cake, oh gosh, like embrace it. It's the greatest thing. Um, Being really clear about who you are and what matters, I think is the other piece of that. Um, there I also think that we don't have to attend every argument we're invited to.
Yeah.
Sometimes and I'll tell, I still am more likely to advocate for someone else than I am myself. I would, I mean, I just did this last weekend. We were at a restaurant and I got a meal and it was like, oh my gosh, this steak is disgusting. Like it's rare, like not cooked at all the way I ordered it. And I just kind of pushed it to the side and was going to eat the rest. And my husband, they walked by and they're like, oh, is there something wrong? And I was like, no, it's fine. My husband goes, no, like her steak isn't, it's not cooked right. And they took it and fixed it. But if it had been his, or one of the kids, I would have said something. But because it was mine, I just was like, it's all right. I didn't, but I think getting to that place of worthiness is huge. So Brene Brown, I've done a lot of work with reading her books. And I told you I met a therapist that really helped me and impacted my life greatly in my mid 30s and or early to mid 30s. And helped me through a lot of that stuff. And so that's been very integral to my healing.
Yeah.
Choosing to also choosing the amount of time that I put into things that could lead to conflict, I think is another part of it. So sometimes I know for me, like I need to get education about adoption to make sure I'm continuing to serve my clients well. Sometimes it goes from being educational to like not helpful anymore and figuring out like what that line is to make sure that I'm paying attention to like things that have been screened well. Do you know what I mean? Like paying attention to things that have been screened well, not just people on Facebook communicating. Does that make sense? Like,
You mean people listening to people that have done the work, do you mean?
yes, right. Yes.
Yeah. I feel it fascinating be fascinating to know what proportion of adoptees do the work. What do the therapists? I think I found you through, I may be wrong. I think I may have found you through Chaitra's. Chaitra, I can't remember how to pronounce her surname. Lerner. I mean, I found her a list of adoptee therapists, and there's 250 of you. There's 250 therapists who are adoptees.
Yeah.
Who serve fellow adoptees, amongst other people. So that seems quite a small number compared to how many adoptees there are in the States. A couple of million.
Yeah.
Seems kind of low. And you look at Nancy Verrier's book. I think it's got 1,400 comments on it. And I got into trouble the other week because I put on Facebook that the second book has only got 70 reviews. And I thought that was interesting. 1,400 reviews for the first one and 70 for the second one. I thought it was quite a low number. And somebody came back at me saying, well, it's a longer book. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I did hear a very shocking stat in terms of UK adoptions. So only 1% of adoptions in the UK at the moment is voluntary. 1%.
Wow.
So 99% are the courts, the police, the authorities. Yeah, it's a very, very low number. So this, but you're saying that clients come to you wanting to be called out on stuff. So there's this.
Times.
Yeah, there's this clients coming to you. They're aware perhaps of this. It hard to be that it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame, and they're not. They're seeking invalidation. They're seeking new. They're seeking new insights. They're seeking light bulb moments. So before we recorded, you said that every adoption, everybody's definition of healing is different, and everybody's healing journey is different.
Right.
Have you read The Primal Wound?
I have.
Yeah. I asked a question on Facebook about it yesterday. To what extent does it address the needs of different people, or the fact that experiences are different, or to put it more within the metaphor, that some primal wounds are like paper cuts, and some primal wounds are like a leg's being bitten off by a great white shark, right? And I didn't get really most people said no. Nobody said it did, should we say? So it doesn't seem to describe this scale of size of wound. What do you have a take on that? The size of wounds you see, or the size of wounds you see, or whether you think that her theory does describe the different sizes of wound.
Let me try to say this, which I think is right along the same lines, but something that I have noticed. I work with kids, and so people bring me their children and say, we're really struggling with this type of behavior. And I will sit in my office for, hours at a time, and child after child is paraded into my office. Different adoption circumstances, some private adoption from birth, some through the Department of Child Services. But with adoption histories, or most with adoption histories, all with similar behavioral challenges. And with parents that I trust are doing a good job at home. Like, these parents are solid caregivers. I know that these children are being fed and nourished well. They're getting good sleep. I mean, these are things that I'm asking about at my intake. They're given good opportunities for education, for nurture. Um, so we're really kind of checking a lot of the boxes. But I am continuing to be baffled by why do we continue to see these same challenges? And so what is going on there? There has to be something going on. I am and so I then think back to, is it that is adoption? Like what is it? Is the separation? Is it this primal wound? Is that what it is? When I'm talking to adoptees that are older, so teens and adults, I hear things like, well, I don't want a relationship with birth family at all, no matter what behavior might have looked like when they were younger. So they might have had similar behavior challenges, right? I don't want a relationship with biological family. I'm happy with the family that's raised me. I have no desire to connect. And so that it's like, well, is that a primal wound challenge then? Like, are they in complete denial? What is going on there? I can only trust what they're saying. I can't tell them, no, you're an adoptee. I know that you have a need somewhere, and so we're going to do this. They're an adult, um, or they're saying, I really do want to get to know this person, and so then we start a search process or something. It is interesting to me that adults talk about similar challenges as young children. And so we can say, I mean, I feel like I've not done the research on this, but I feel like I can say there's something happening that's causing some behavioral challenges early for young children. Now, I also have a very limited view, right? Because I'm seeing adoptees whose parents feel like they need therapy. So I don't see every adoptee in the world. But something is going on that it's not like they're all hanging out before they come into my office. Like, here's what we're going to do when we go in there. We're all going to look the same.
Yeah.
But the behaviors are very similar. And then, by the time they become adults or late teens, though, how they're managing that looks very different. And so, to answer that question, whether it is a paper cut primal wound or a shark bite primal wound, I feel like that kind of goes along with that question of, I don't know. I don't know what I try to do early in those children's lives when I'm meeting them early. And so what I'm doing when I'm meeting them early is to do Theraplay, which is bonding and attachment and helping them to feel safe where they are. Because at that point, I can't change what's happened, right? They're adopted by the time they get to me, and that is just what it is. And so how can I help them feel safe and heard where they are? I want to make sure kids have a voice, that parents are understanding their cues, and that parents aren't so overwhelmed by what's going on. And so that's the other part of, doing the adoptive parent retreat is, I know that when I'm taking care of adoptive parents, they're going to provide good care for adopted children.
Yeah.
I really view my role as a therapist for children or for adoptees, that I need to take care of the whole family. That it's a family therapy practice. It's not, I tell people I'm not a dry cleaner. You don't drop your kids off to me and I'm gonna like clean them up and send them out to you. We work as a family to help them, um, to help the whole system improve how it's operating together. So I use Theraplay for that. What I'm hoping to do over the last year, I've started to seek training in perinatal mood disorders and in mental health challenges. And so I see that for birth parents and then also for adoptive parents. So there's like that time after an adoption happens that adoptive parents are really struggling with, oh my gosh, this is a lot. And making sure that somebody's providing support to them. So I'm trying to make it so that at least here in my state that they have someone to call when they're having that very early frustration, and we're starting to see babies that maybe are struggling with attachment, that moms know that they've got someone to call and can get support early on, and they're not waiting until the kids are 4, 5, and 6 years old before they're kind of at, I don't want to say emergency level, but it's causing major issues before they call.
Sounds great, that. Before we started recording, just want to flip back to adult adoptees. You said that you felt a lot of people were looking for an apology.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. I actually see this even in kids, and I don't know that kids know that that's what they're looking for, but they want an explanation. They want to understand. Even when I met my biological father, he said to me, I looked myself in the mirror every single day and knew that you were out here and knew that someday you would contact me and wondered what I was going to say. But I think everybody wants to know what happened, like why, either to answer the question of why couldn't you keep me? Was it me? Was I not enough? Was I too much? I think what we immediately go to is, that idea of, was it me? Or was it you? Like, were you not in a good situation? Most people think that adoptions happen because it's a really young parent and they have their whole life ahead of them, and we don't want to strip them of their opportunities or something. That's kind of the story that's often sold, and that's really not who does adoptions usually. It happens sometimes, but usually it's someone who has other children. And so that can be really difficult for an adoptee when they learn that mom is already parenting a couple of other kids and that she just couldn't parent one more. And that can be really, really challenging. But I think hearing that there's never going to be an apology. There's never going to be enough of a reason that's going to make that make sense. It's about knowing capacity for that person who's choosing to do an adoption. And, sometimes could it be that social services could have come along and helped them out? Maybe so. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some people are looking for a big apology, aren't they? They're looking for the authorities to apologize. They're looking for the system to apologize as well. Yeah. and to
Yeah.
change.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's, aren't we all? Aren't we all? That the system has done a lot wrong. And I would say, Department of Child Services or whatever it's called in your state or country or community, to adoption agencies. I know adoption in the UK is so different than here, where it's more profitable. And there are a lot of people asking for things to be different. I think the best apology is for change to occur. I'm seeing that happen on some levels. I think that is where there is good work by adoptees, and by even adoptive parents that are kind of coming together and saying, I wish I had known this information. Here's how to screen for a good agency when you are wanting to pursue adoption. There's groups that I'm in, and the narrative is just, it's insane that people go, well, I want to adopt a child. Tell me where to begin. And it's just like if you were to want to, I don't know, like buy a house, like there's just so many out there, and you just, fill out your mortgage application and you just get matched with your right house. Like that's the belief. It's outlandish.
Talking about beliefs, one of my fascinations is how that visceral loss that we sometimes feel as adoptees, that relinquishment loss. We've talked about it last time we spoke. How that, which is a very emotional thing, becomes a very cognitive thing in terms of a belief, and how that happens. This is a fascination of mine, and I often ask it on the podcast, because to me it seems that beliefs are more bustable. I believe beliefs are more bustable. They seem more bustable than trauma seems healable. Trauma seems really tricky, deep-rooted, mystic, beyond my ken. It seems really tricky. But beliefs, okay, well, if it's a belief, then that's something I can do something about. So how do you believe that relinquishment feeling becomes a belief that we're not good enough? Because that sums up the experience for so many of us.
Well, I think in the absence of information, we create our own stories, and we want to believe the best about the people that we come from. And so we're going to take that on and go, well, it must have been me.
Wow.
Because we don't want to say, oh, my mom couldn't handle it, or my mom, so I was too much. I was not enough. And I think that that's how that happens, because how else could you explain this deep longing that you feel? And, I told you I I was raised around, I mean, I had a relationship with my birth mother, like with my mom, like she's my mom still today. Um, but there's a longing for relationships still there with her. She and I, we didn't have those years and that time bonding. I had that with my nanny. And so there's there's a lot of gaps in that foundation of that relationship. Um, I acknowledge and feel that still today, even though there's a relationship there. Um, with my biological father, I feel that even though there's a relationship still today, or that there's a relationship there today, we've been in reunion since I was 17. And there's a lot of gaps. There's just, um, I told him several years ago, though, I said, I wish there was a different word for you because I call you biological father and you're more than that, but you're less than dad. And so I don't know what the word is. There's just not one. Um, which makes all of this really complicated,
Yeah.
but it just is. Um,
Yeah. I heard something over the weekend on the identity thing, and it was it was anything. It wasn't anything to do with adoption. I think I was listening to an interview with a sports person, and they were born in Wales, right? So I was born in Wales. So the United Kingdom is England, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, right? So those four different countries make up the UK. So this guy said, well, like I can't remember whether it was. They said, well, he said on one level, I'm Welsh, and on another level, I'm British. Right? So I'm from the United Kingdom, and he was completely okay with that. So what that means in practical terms is if he was a footballer, I'm sorry, I can't remember what sport it was, but if he's a footballer, he would play for Wales.
mm-hmm.
And if he went to the Commonwealth, if he went to the Commonwealth Games, what the British Empire became the Commonwealth. If he went to the Commonwealth Games, he would play for. He would appear for Welsh for the Welsh. I think this is how it worked. But if he went to the Olympic Games, he would appear for the British team.
Mm.
And it was an area where two identities, you're totally okay with it. You're totally okay with it. And I just thought, how could we, how could that help that shift help adoptees? And I was thinking about a international transracial adoptee, a Brit that came on the show, and she was born in Hong Kong, but she's Chinese origins, Chinese racially. Is that the word? Yeah. She's a Chinese race. And she said, well, I pick and choose, right, between the two. I'm blended with both, and I can decide when I want to be Chinese and
Right.
when I want to be Brit, white British. And I was just thinking, yeah, that it's our comfort in the situation. It's the meaning. I really struggled with Shakespeare at school, right? So I don't quote Shakespeare. He was writing in a different language as far as I can say. But he said something which was nothing has any meaning and until we give it one. and like that that's why the mindset thing that you said at the top kind of got things going for me, because this is how we see things. And even the word mindset is kind of tricky, because think of something that is set, right? Concrete is set. I don't want mindset. I want mind fluid. I want to be growing, learning, being curious,
Right.
listening to the guests and see what healing insights I can gain from them, which means mind open, mind fluid, not mindset, and being curious about it. But we use this word mindset, and it's like it's not a great word, is it? When you look at it, when you break it down, it's not a great word.
It's not a good characterization of what you want to have happening there. But I think there are people who have a very closed mindset, and then people who have a very open mindset too.
Yeah. So, but the adjective would be unnecessary if you
Right.
just distinguish between mindset and mind fluid, right?
Right.
Like a spectrum.
That's the name of a book.
Hey, mind fluid, yeah. Mind fluid for adoptees. No, but
Yeah.
we wouldn't read it, and neither would I. I wouldn't read mind fluid. How adoptees can become more curious and heal. No, I wouldn't read that book. I wouldn't read that book. I don't think. I definitely wouldn't give. I wouldn't use the title in a book for adoptees, because it's about how we feel, isn't it? You said feeling better, and I think that's got to be the that's what we don't want to think good, do we? We want to feel good. Yeah. There's a band from the before your time, right? I've got 25 years on you, as of tomorrow. 26 at the moment. There was a band in the 70s called Dr. Feelgood. It wasn't Dr. Think Good, was it? It's Dr.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, those moments when there is a shift shift goes on in our mind, whether that happens listening to you on this podcast, or reading a book, or wherever it happens, that's the difference that makes the difference, when there is a shift in what's going on inside us. And that's why it scares the bejesus out of me when I see those people. Yeah, it's got to be an inside job, isn't it? It's got to be an inside job, and we've got to do our own work internally, like before we. I see it as putting our healing on hold. If we're waiting for somebody else's opinion or behavior to change, even before we can feel good about ourselves, we're going to be waiting an awful long time.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I see I think there's a place for healing, and then I think that people can sometimes get really stuck and um kind of live in a really challenging place. Um this maybe is something that I've learned because of my job and because of many years of working in a helping profession, but being able to say, okay, I'm gonna deal with that later, or I'm gonna just step away from that piece of things right now, and I'm gonna focus on what I need to do right now to get through today, and what I need to do to be healthy. Um, I think that that's a real gift. And sometimes people struggle with that. I wish that I could give that gift to others sometimes, that there's a lot of hurt that happens when people get stuck, and they'll put themselves in positions with either work or just life where they kind of live out their most difficult parts of their story over and over and over and over and over, and don't really want to move past that, or aren't really able to.
Yeah, because they haven't had the insight that they need. I'm not, I'll count myself in on that. I haven't had the insight that I need.
Same, yes. Yep.
Cool. So it's about waiting at the bus stop for insights, as we sometimes say. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Because the conversation's just gone, and we're an hour in or something, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the concept of healing and adoption is one that, well, you've said it, it's an inside job, right? It's something that waiting for someone else to do or to show up is difficult to wait for. If I could encourage anything, it would be to do as much as someone could on their own, because it's difficult to imagine this, but you may not get the answers that you want, and that's just the reality of this situation. The other thing I would say is, if you don't have a community who understands you, find one, but be with people who are interested in seeking healing, that are not wanting to just live hurt. And I think there's a difference in that. And you'll know it. And I don't think people intend to stay living hurt. But sometimes it's difficult to, it's easier to just live hurt than it is to really do the work to move on. And then know that as with anything, adoption doesn't change who you get to be. You can still be an incredible whole human being, even if your beginning wasn't what you wanted it to be.
Brilliant. That's a fantastic point to end with, Megan. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you, listeners, for listening. We'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.